Okay, so now we're going to talk about joint placement a little bit. This is the beginnings of actually doing the rigging. And the best way to do this, if you like to use your top menu, is to make sure that you click on this little box here. You get a drop-down menu, and you want to change it to animation. I prefer using the space bar most of the time, and you can have multiple menu sets in here, and animation is one of those. Okay, so these menus match these menus up here. So I'm going to go to the skeleton, to the joint tool, and when you're placing joints, you always want to do that in an orthographic view. Okay, so your perspective view is outlawed for now, because it will not give you the results you want. So I'm going to switch to the front view. I'm going to make sure X-ray joints is on. That's this little icon here. And I could also just turn the mesh transparent, but that gets kind of messy when you have a lot of pieces of geometry like this little girl does. Well, sometimes it could be helpful. Now, when you're placing joints, you always want to start at the root, or the cog. And the cog is short for center of gravity. And for humans, that's your pelvis. Okay, wherever your pelvis, the easiest way to think about this is wherever your pelvis goes, your body will follow. You can't help it. Now, your foot can move independent of your pelvis, and so can a hand. And so they are not the center of gravity. Okay, so just a way to think about it. So I'm going to snap this joint to the center onto a grid point by holding down X and then clicking on next to a grid intersection. And the first place I want to do is work my way up the spine. So I'm going to add in just a few joints. And I can add them, make sure I add them in a perfectly straight line by holding down Shift. Until I get up to the collar. Okay. Now, I switch to my translate tool and I want to make sure that these are distributed well. So this is going to be her collar. Now I can move a joint that has children without moving its children, like in this scenario, this joint up here at the top, this one, is a child of this joint. And in fact, I can verify that by going to the Window Hypergraph Hierarchy Editor, and here's the list of my joints thus far. Okay, so it has a child. Now I can move joint 3 without moving joint 4 if I want to by holding down D. Well, making sure I have my translate tool selected, and then hold down D, and then I can move that joint in without moving its child. Okay, so that can be really handy. So I'm just going to try to evenly distribute these up and down the torso. And I'm only worried about the two axes that are represented in this front view, the Y and the X. Okay. Now I can continue to add to this by clicking on in the toolbar over here on the last used tool, the joint tool. Or I could go to the menu and select joint tool again. Or the simplest way is I can just press Y. And after I do that, if I click on a joint, it will select it. And then I can continue to add joints in. Which will be parented to that particular, the joint you clicked on first. Okay? So I'm going to work my way down the arm. And I'm going to go straight out, even though that doesn't belong that way. Okay, and I'm not going to show you guys how to rig fingers because that's extra time, and it's the same as rigging an arm. Okay, so we'll save a little time by not doing that. Okay, now this isn't lined up, so I'm switching back to the shoulder, and I need to line it up with the arm. So I need to rotate this down so that it lines up with the wrist here. Okay, and now I need to translate it. I'm going to hold down D because I don't want to move the elbow or the wrist or the hand. And I'm going to Okay, so I've got a little bit of a problem, and that's called my joint orient. So we weren't planning on getting to that yet, so I'm not going to cover it. Basically, I want to move this down, so I'm going to move it down, and I'll show you another way to do this here in a little bit. I have to realign that one, the elbow. Then I can pick walk down by pressing down on my keyboard, and I can move this to the actual wrist, and then I have my the hand joint here. So I'll scoot that back in like that. Okay. Now, when we're rigging, and before we've done what was called our smooth bind, we can't have any rotation on our joints. It's bad news. It just makes things a lot more difficult than they need to be. So I need to remake these joints here. So the easiest way to do that is if I press Y on my keyboard, I can select this joint again. Then I'm going to hold down, I'm going to turn off polygons so I don't see them, because I know that these are in the right place, but the shoulder at least has rotation on it, and I can't have that. So I hold down V, and I can snap to these joints that are already made. And press Enter to finish. And now I can delete this original set. And this set now is in the exact same location as the previous ones, except that they don't have rotates. And that's just what I needed. Okay, so let me turn back on polygons. I'm going to press up until I get back to the pelvis, and I'm going to start creating the leg bones. So I'm going to press Y. I'm going to select that root or cog joint. I'm going to place my hip. I'm not doing this anatomically correct, but they're kind of hidden up in there. And we want these joints to end up going straight down the leg. So I'm going to hold down Shift and place them that way. Okay, press Enter. I'm going to select this joint here and scoot it over so it lines up down to the center of the bottom portion of the leg. I'm not so worried about the top portion on this particular character. We would pay closer attention to that if it weren't covered up so much. Okay, so now that's lined up. Now, when we're placing these joints, we need to know whether or not we're going to use what's called inverse kinematics. And I know you will not know what that is at the point of this tutorial, but basically it can